Good morning, and thanks for coming to our session. I wasn't sure if anybody's going to show up. This is to me, the most exciting session on the agenda, but I don't know. You have to look at some of the other ones look pretty good too. Hi, come on in. There's some handouts on the table right there. So this is my partner, Mary Lou, for the day. She's going to take the end of the presentation, and I'm going to do the beginning. And I promise not to go over on time. The stressful thing about talking about the subjects that we're going to talk about is we only have an hour here, and we're already behind a little bit. But literally, this could be a seminar that's like a 2-day long event. So I'm going to highlight it and talk about kind of like the industry standards on how you handle some things. And then I have a packet that I've given you that you can take home with you, which gives you a lot of really good information. And then from there, my business card is also on there. If you have any questions, just shoot me an email. You can call me. This is volunteer time, so you won't be charged if you have any questions or anything like that, so don't worry. So we'll just kick right into it. My name is John Horell, and I'm an accountant with a local accounting firm, Sickler, Tarpey & Associates. We have an office down in Tyrone and then one in Altoona. And we specialize in doing tax returns, financial statements. We work on some audits, and we also do, we have a payroll service. So what that means is we can calculate paychecks for you. We can write your paychecks for you. We can file your quarterly taxes, which are the tax returns that are due because of payroll. And we can do it all for you. But then we can also just do a little bit of that. We can just do the quarterlies, and you do your own payroll. So we really customize our service to what the client needs. And you're going to find that's the same with any payroll service. There's companies like Keystone Payroll and Paychecks, ADP. These are names you might have heard before. All they do is payroll type functions. And then, most accounting firms will offer this as a service as well, in addition to doing taxes and everything else. So when you have that employee, most of the time, clients will call me and they say, hey, I got Jack or I got Jill here, and I really like them, and I want to hire them, and I just don't even know where to start. So what I usually do is I send them our new hire packet. We have some discussions about, well, you got to give this person a W-2. You got to set their wage. We'll talk about a benefits package if they're interested in doing that. And with the benefit package, a lot of time we're referring them off to somebody else, like a health insurance provider or AFLAC or retirement planning, things like that. So a group of people are kind of helping to put this payroll together. But the new hire packet, which is what I gave you, it consists of the forms that you need to fill out and keep within your files. Oh no, so boring, we lost 2 already. No, that's fine. That's fine. See, if you leave, we make fun of you. No. So the new hire packet, these items you have to fill out and you have to keep them on file. And I always tell the clients, send me a copy as well so I can keep it so we have this information. Every employee will fill it out. And when you go through it, it's the same questions over on different.
Do you save it in a paper copy, or do they let you scan it?
We scan it, yeah. We scan them and save them on our server. So technically, if the clients don't keep it, it's not the end of the world, but we tell them to keep it as well. But I'll go through the list here of just what these forms are and why they're filled out to give you an idea. So the first one's the I-9, which, you're finding out if the individual is a citizen of the United States and eligible to work. And that is a federal form. And there's some information that goes along with it as far as documented proof. And that's, in the instruction sheet there. Hi, good morning. Come on in.
Did everybody fill this out now? It's required.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Morning. And the next form is called the W-4, which is the one that everybody's familiar with. Most people think that that's the only form that you have to fill out, but that's just not true. So the W-4, the employee is telling you, for tax withholding purposes, how many exemptions they have, if they want to have any extra money withheld for federal taxes. I can't stress enough, this form is so important. And if the employee is coming to you with questions like, I don't know how to fill this out, it's very much based on their tax situation. So ask them to contact, their tax accountant, or, they can call my office. I can give them a hand with it. Because if you mess up this form, when you go to file your individual taxes at the end of the year, you're either going to owe or you're going to have a huge refund. Now, if you have a huge refund, Nobody ever complains about that, but it's when people owe. So we spend a lot of time advising people to update their W-4s so they don't owe taxes at the end of the year. And there's no right or wrong way other than you have to look at their total tax situation and see what's best for them. And there's so many pages in the instruction. Most people are just so confused by that form. The next form is your residency certification form. This tells the local taxing authorities where you live and what your tax rate's supposed to be. Pennsylvania is one of the most confusing states for local taxes. Everybody has their own rates. The rates can be different if you live in one area, work in another. So, this form is very important, and it will tell us exactly how much we need to withhold for that individual. The next form is a Pennsylvania form. It's a new hire reporting form. All information, you've already told the federal government through the I-9, that you're hiring somebody. Now it's your turn to tell the state who you're hiring. And then the last form is, well, not the last form, but the next form in the list there. It's a federal form, and it's a Form 8850. And the reason we put that in there is yes?
I'm sorry. So I haven't done this form, so now I'm like, really, so this Department of Labor and Industry form.
Yep.
This thing right here,
The new hire reporting form, yeah.
who's that go to?
Pennsylvania. Yeah. Yeah, and if you use the payroll service, they may have completed these and you just didn't know they did.
Oh, they probably did it.
They may have, yeah.
I got you. Okay.
So you can check with them and they can
Okay.
let you know. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, the next form, this federal one, this Form 8850, the reason we threw it in there is because there's a program right now called the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. So the government will actually reward you for hiring certain individuals. And it's people that, were on public assistance or might have been in the military. There's a whole list, and it's kind of always changing. So we added it to our new hire packet because if the employee sees something on there and says, hey, that's me, as an employer, there's a benefit to you. So, that's why it's part of our new hire packet.
So who does that go to?
It's for the federal government, but it's for the payroll service provider. Yeah, so that we can perform the additional steps to make sure you get that tax credit.
So am I correct with this one, like you have to have that the first day they work, because if you realize later that they fit into that category, you won't get that.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, so typically you do your interview process, you select your individual, you set up a meeting with them, which is like an orientation day. They get all this stuff together for you, and you have it in your records, and most companies there's like a training day or a training video and stuff, but you want to have this stuff done before they show up for that first day. And then the final piece is the local service tax. And I'll just talk about, federal taxes. You have your federal 941, which is the quarterly tax form that employers fill out quarterly, which reports your wages, and then it reconciles your withholding, Social Security, Medicare. With Pennsylvania, you have a Pennsylvania form, and that form you're showing your state withholding on that form. There's a separate office that handles Pennsylvania unemployment. But when you get, and those things, most people have some knowledge of them, or they're pretty easy to look up and figure out. Where it gets a little complicated is with the local. So with local, you have two taxes, your employee withholding tax, so the employer has to submit that tax to the local tax office for the employees. So you have to make sure the rate's right, and it can be different rates for different people based on where they live. But then there's also this LST tax, and that stands for local service tax. Typically it's $52 a year. And that tax, it pays for the medical services like ambulances, fire trucks, all that kind of stuff. But if an employee doesn't pay it, like I just had a client last week, their employer didn't withhold this tax for a number of years, 5 or 6 years. So they got a letter from the local tax office saying, you have to pay this $52, then you got to pay these interest fees, then you got to pay this penalty. And the employee was like, hey, this wasn't my fault, it was my employer. So in that case, it was the employee's fault because you're supposed to know about this stuff. But, they went back and yelled at their employer, so they figured it out. I don't know how they ended up getting the money paid and everything. So, these things, if they're overlooked now, they can become bigger issues later, which is the point of giving you the new hire packet form. You want your employees to fill this out. You want to make sure that you're taking care of this first in the beginning. So now you have this filled out. You've either hired somebody to do payroll for you, or you're going to take a shot at it yourself. I would recommend, an accounting program. There's spreadsheets out there you can download for free that do it, but the problem is you have to find the one that's specific for your area, that has local taxes included and everything like that. QuickBooks is pretty good at setting that stuff up, and they're getting better at like the interview form where you can set it up yourself. So once you start to pay the employee, if you're using an accounting program, the taxes will be withheld automatically. Now remember, that's not your money as a business owner. So what we always tell people is set up 2 accounts, one business account and one payroll account. And make sure you're moving that money over to a payroll account, because at the end of the quarter, you have to send it to the government. And the government does not like it when you get to the end of their quarter and the money's not available. They basically feel like you've stolen your employees' money and spent it. So separate that money, and then at the end of the quarter, we typically in the industry we call them quarterly taxes. You'll file with the federal government, the state, and the locals, and it reconciles how much was withheld, how much was paid. And you do that for 4 quarters of the year. And then at the end of the year, there's some extra steps. You have your W-2s that go to your employees and get sent in, and there's another reconciliation process. So all that being said, with the amount of time that we have today, I won't go into a lot of detail on that process, but to wrap things up, when you start a business or you buy a business or however you get into business, you only have so many hours in the day. And these things can be extremely complicated, and you can spend a lot of time trying to master this stuff, where there are so many services available to you, and they're all priced about the same, and they're all very affordable. So this is definitely one area that I would say, pick somebody who you trust, somebody who's available, because you need to communicate this stuff constantly. You hiring somebody, firing somebody, all that stuff. And outsource it to them and let them handle it. And only educate yourself so you know generally what's going on, so you can keep an eye on the service provider, make sure everything's getting taken care of. So leave it up to the experts, and I can answer questions now, but I probably prefer I'll take those at the end. That way Mary Lou has all her time to speak as well. So, but thanks for coming and picking our session, and I will turn it over. So.
My name's Mary Lou Maierhofer. I'm a lawyer. Okay, everyone run now. I'm a nice lawyer. I'm a good lawyer. I'm a lawyer who typically represents employers. So if you look at my handout and kind of listen to what I say today, you'll never have to deal with me, or never have to deal with those other guys and girls on the other side of the table. Someone asked me one time, what type of law do you do? And I said, well, those advertisements for Egg or Snyder, and they say, we'll get money for you. They got to come through me first to get it. So, all right, so this subject is hiring your first employee. And I do a lot of employment law. So I've picked up a few tips along the way. I'm not going to go through the handout because, quite frankly, it's long, it's involved, and it's really boring. So I want to kind of give you some practical tips on what you want to do. So the first thing you decide is, I needed help, or I just lost someone that I need to replace. Before you do your advertising, before you do your interviewing, sit down and write out what that person's duties are or will be. You want to have it written out, what those essential job requirements are, or the essential job duties. Once you have that written out, it's easy to put an advertisement in. You get to decide where you're going to advertise. Where's your favorite place to advertise? Well, it depends on your generation. If you're from my father's generation, and God bless him, he's 92 years of age, you put it in the local newspaper. Not nowadays. You're putting it on the web. You're putting it on your Facebook page. Here's the problem with that. If you are putting it on the new and improved electronic media, you're excluding certain portions of the population. And there have been cases coming down saying that because you are only putting it on a web page, on your Facebook, or on one of the known employment, and you're not doing anything like paper or anything else, or like CareerLink or something like that, they're saying you're discriminating by age. And there are cases out there that are holding that you are excluding a certain population, and employers have been sued. Now, they're the big boys and girls in the world. They're like the McDonald's and the Targets and things like that. But you have to be aware of who your target is and be careful you don't shoot yourself in your foot by excluding certain people. So you do your advertising and you do it right, and you get to do what you want to really do next is look at all these resumes. And you're looking at these resumes, or if you're doing, saying, hey, come in and fill a job application out in my business, walking in, don't immediately do an interview with that person, okay? Not unless they're your cousin's second removed son who, comes from a good family. So nepotism lives, okay? But you want to be able to look at all of the resumes, all the job applications, and make sure that that little sheet that you put together earlier, those job essential requirements or duties, match up. Because there could be certain categories of people that you would exclude. You have to be very careful and make sure you do this blindly. Not as a disability, but as a precaution, okay? You want to be able, and I've explained this to my clients, you want to look at the resumes or the job applications and say, okay, I don't know if this is male, I don't know if this is female, I don't know if this is a transgender, I don't know if this person's disabled. I am looking at the requirements. Do they have the education? Do they have the driver's license? Any of that, those essential things. Those people that meet all those requirements go in this stack. Those people that don't have those requirements go in this stack, all right? So now you have this stack of people that meet all your job essential requirements. What are you going to do now? You're going to set up interviews. Who's going to do the interviewing? Where is it going to be held? Excuse me. The interview, yes?
Okay, so they send you your resume. Are you suggesting that you also have, your organization have a job application?
Some have both. Depending on the type of employment that you have, you should have both. And I'll get to that later on why you should. So your interviewing process, maybe you pick a day, or maybe the people you contact can only do it after hours because they still have a job, or early in the morning. Pick times and pick people who you trust to do the interviewing, okay? If you have, I call him Bob Blowhart, the class clown of the office who sometimes makes rude comments, but everyone overlooks him. He's not the person you want, okay? You want the straight-laced, no-nonsense person who could basically put a church to sleep doing that interview, okay? And you want to have two people, if you can, do the interviewing. Why? Because if something's said during that interview, you want to have accountability. Because if someone in your organization says something that they shouldn't, you need to have that knowledge right away to be able to correct the problem. But also on the flip side, if something happens, like say if it's a male interviewing a female or vice versa, and allegations are made regarding inappropriate comments, there's that check and balance system. Okay, so You decided that you're going to have 2 of your best employees, or you and one of your other employees that is going to do the interviewing. Where are you going to do the interview? Do it in a conference room. Do it in an area that there are no types of disruptions, interruptions, anything. That you can be the one-on-one, two-on-one with this person to kind of get to know them. The interview in the storefront or in the back room as employees are coming back saying, hey, the cash register broke. Hey, the distributor called and they can't make the order. No. Because you want to kind of get a sense of the person that you're going to interview, because they may be your next employee that you trust with your product or your service. So you have your room, whether it's a small conference room or you're doing it after hours, or you have a picnic bench in the back or in your yard, in your office, that you can just have that quietness. Leave your cell phone in your office. Turn it off, give it to someone, don't take it in with you. You want to next have those questions, and I recommend having written questions. So you know what you want to ask, okay? You don't want to ask questions that will get you into trouble. So if you have the questions written out ahead of time, and the other person who's sitting there kind of just monitoring, or maybe it's an interaction between one person writes, or one person asks, the other person writes the question, answers down. It also gives you a sense of that person so you can compare later multiple job applicants to make sure you can say, oh yeah, that was a great answer. Or did that person answer that question? What did they say exactly? So that's kind of a check and balance on that. And when that person comes in to interview, make sure they fill out a job application. Now the job application, if you don't have them, that's fine. I recommend you have one for a couple reasons. First of all, you get the basic information down. There are forms out there on the internet that you can pull off. One thing that you should have for that form is the fact that the person's attesting to the accuracy of the information on the application. And second of all, that they are giving you permission to contact the references that they have listed on that job application. And that's important because you have to ask permission to contact those references. Just because someone puts references down on their resume doesn't mean that you get to go and call those people, okay? It's a permission, or you could be in trouble violating certain privacy. And just because you say, oh, is it okay for me to contact you? And most people are like, really? You're asking me permission? I put the, well, there's some people who say, yeah, I put references down, but you can't contact them. Okay, then there's a problem, but you want to know that ahead of time before you violate any type of privacy. All right, so you're in the room, or you're in an area, and it's ADA accessible, okay? So anyone with a disability can basically get there. And you're talking to the person, and you're getting the information, and the person has a disability, okay? I always get the question asked, what is a reasonable accommodation? What is a reasonable adjustment to, and those are the key words. I like to think of it this way, and I've told a couple clients this, and they think I'm nuts, but that's everyone who thinks that. I saw a cartoon years and years ago, because I do a lot of employment seminars. And there's this cartoon of Santa Claus, and he's standing on the roof, and he has one of his elves there. And he said, do you think it's a reasonable accommodation for me to use the front door rather than the chimney? Okay, think about that for a minute. What's Santa Claus's purpose? Santa Claus is delivering gifts. If Santa Claus delivers gifts through the front door, it's the same thing as delivering them through the chimney. Sure, that is a reasonable accommodation. Get the job done. The person may need to have a special chair. The person may need, and I like this, I had a case a couple years ago. They were looking to hire an accountant, and they had one of the houses that they had remodeled, and it was 2 stories. Now, the accountants were upstairs, and the support staff were downstairs. The person was in a wheelchair or had devices he was using. And they called me and said, he's got a great resume, he's got all this experience, he's a great guy, but he can't make it upstairs. My comment to them was, why does he have to be upstairs to do his job? Well, that's where all the accountants are. Why can't he be with the support staff downstairs? Don't you have an area that you can make into an office for him? Well, yeah, the office manager has an office. We could flip that. Problem solved. Because it would be a problem if they hadn't hired him just because of his disability, because they didn't make a reasonable accommodation. And it's not in this area, so don't worry about it. All right. So you've done the interview. You're now ready to check the references. You've asked permission. Great. Are you in a job that requires a background criminal check? If you are, you got to get the forms and you got to get the permission to do that. If you're not in that type of business, say a child care provider working with medicines in a nursing home or something like that, you don't have the right to do that. Okay, you don't have the right to do that, but let me give you some hints. Facebook is a wonderful place to find out information. The Pennsylvania magistrate docket is online. So you can run that person's name through the docket and you'll find out if they have speeding tickets up to criminal charges filed. And then you can go look at the local courthouse and find out if that's important to you. Because in Pennsylvania, you cannot ask, typically, because most jurisdictions have adopted or are in the process of adopting the, quote, ban the box, where it asks, have you been convicted of any criminal matters? Okay, for licensed people like John, myself, nurses, other teachers who all have licenses, if you have a valid license, there aren't going to be crimes typically that would affect your business. Okay, maybe a nurse has a problem with a lead foot. She's not driving for your organization, you don't care. Maybe she or he had a problem with bouncing some checks. Again, that has nothing to do with her nursing. Now, if you find out that she has been arrested for using or distributing illegal narcotics, yeah, you might have a problem with that. She or he would not have a license, but you don't know. So you need to look and see what you're going to do with your background checking the references. So you're calling a reference and you say, hey, Jane Doe just applied. Can you tell me about her? If it's a former employer, you know what they're going to tell you? She worked from January 1, 2000 to January 2010. That's all they're going to tell you. And you know what? If someone calls you for a reference on a former employee, that's all you're going to say too. When they worked for you. Well, how were they as an employee? They worked from January 1, 2000 to January 1, 2010. Were they on time? They worked from January 1. I mean, the employer should understand that. But again, that's all you legally should say. I mean, if you want to say, oh yeah, they were great, they were wonderful, you know, they worked for us for 5 years, then they went to work for somewhere else, but they were a great person. Hey, do you know what happened within that 5 years or what happened between that time period? Do you know if they were arrested for drugs? Do you know if they were arrested for child abuse? Do you know anything that you're putting your reputation and potentially your liability on? Now, on the flip side is you're sitting there looking at these references going, I'm not getting anything here. I'm not getting anything. Again, the internet. There should be 1 or 2 people that they put on as personal. Oh yeah, like they're gonna lie and say these people have molested children or done drugs. Yeah, they're not gonna do it. But at least you call. You made the effort. You know why you're gonna do that? Because if something happens later, you can say, I called this person, and this is what they said, because you jotted down on their resume or jotted down on a piece of paper what they said and put it in their personnel file because you hired them. So that kind of protects you to a certain degree because you've put some information in there. So now you decide to make the offer. How are you going to make the offer? You're going to call them up and say, hey, you got a job. No, you can do that, but you want to do it also in writing. You can say, hey, I'm going to offer you the job. I'm going to send you by email. I'm going to send you by snail mail. You want to come in and I will offer it. But what you're going to do is you're going to have an offer letter. And that offer letter is going to outline the duties, and you always want to put your duties are, okay, if it's a clerk, you're going to check the cash register, you're going to stock the shelves, you're going to open up, and opening up requires A, B, and C, and closing requires A, B, and C. And then you're going to put at the beginning of that or at the end of that, that is including but not limited to any other duties that are requested. That keeps it open in case, for example, you now divide the work up. You have 2 clerks. You have a senior clerk and a just regular clerk. So the senior clerk gets to do certain things and the regular clerk. So you do the including but not limited to type thing. That's a lawyer's favorite phrase, besides the fact that we've granted attorney's fees. Now, you want to put the start date. You want to put the salary or the hourly rate. You want to put whether overtime's available and how it's paid. You want to put benefits, if there are benefits. If there are no benefits, say it's an hourly and they get 20 hours a week and there's no benefits, you want to put that there are no benefits in there so they don't assume later. You also want to put in that letter that they are an at-will employee. Always have that at-will employee in there, because you can hire and fire them for any reason, all right, based on certain state and federal laws. That's the caveat. You can't discriminate. You can't fire someone for turning in someone who has claimed sexual harassment or something like that. So you've made the offer. Is that position contingent upon passing a drug test? Is that position contingent upon passing a lie detector test? If those things are important and are part of the position, put that in the letter as well. You've made the offer. You've made it contingent upon all of these things. John told you about the I-9. Okay, that's saying whether you're a citizen or not. Get the form filled out. Whether you know or don't know or anything, just get the form filled out and put it in your file. Because you know what? If immigration comes in and looks at your files, or the federal government comes in and looks in your files and it's not in there, you're in trouble. If it's in there, even if it's been falsified by the person, not your problem, okay? Because you got the file. You got the paperwork in there. All right, lie detector tests. Anyone have to do lie detector tests? Okay, lie detector tests. You have to be careful doing the lie detector tests, right? Because under federal law, there are only certain jobs that you can do lie detector tests for. And that's the same in Pennsylvania. Now with the federal government, if you violate it, you get yelled at, you get a letter, and it's nasty. If you do it in Pennsylvania and you're not one of those exceptions, you can be charged with criminal misdemeanor. So make sure that your job actually falls within one of those exceptions in order to do the lie detector test. Drug tests. Oh boy, do we have a lot of problems with drug tests now, because we have now medical marijuana in Pennsylvania. All right. Everyone in this room is educated, so you understand that smoking a reefer is not medical marijuana, okay? It's not that. Okay, one person now hasn't been educated, okay? Medical marijuana is a pill or is an ointment that is prescribed by a doctor for certain conditions. They are conditions, medical conditions, that are specifically listed in the medical marijuana statute. If you look in this packet that I gave you, it's italicized, is the actual language of the marijuana provision. Understand this. If you are involved with the federal government, you can, if you're testing someone and they have the slip that says medical marijuana, you can legitimately, with a caveat, not hire them because they didn't pass the drug test. But here's the thing. If the person is qualified, if it's an accountant, if it's a lawyer, if it's someone that is not working with high electrical equipment, or it's in the listed, it's high voltage electricity, chemicals which require a permit issued by the federal government or a state government, the whole list there. If they're not dealing with a life-threatening, you can still hire them. It's your option, all right? However, if the person, and this person is qualified, has marijuana card, and is not falling under one of these dangerous exceptions, and you deny employment just because they're on a medical marijuana card, but otherwise they're qualified and can do the job, it's like Santa Claus on the roof, you're going to get in trouble. So always think of Santa. See, you learned something new. All right. Are there any questions?
I'm just going to take you back to the part where you said that as the employer, you call for references and they can only answer they work from this day to that day. I thought you could ask, would you hire them again?
You can ask that, but I have told my clients never to answer that question. You can ask a former employer anything you want, but if they have a smart-ass lawyer like me, they will tell you, don't answer any questions except the time period that they worked for you. Yes, ma'am.
So you talked about going on the internet, looking at those docket lists, and many people don't even really know how to interpret that information that's on a docket list. So am I correct that as an employer, you can't use that as a reason not to hire them because it's not an official background?
That's exactly right.
Trigger you to maybe look into doing a background check. Is that
Right,
what
right, right. The idea with that docket is if you're going to hire someone as a driver, like a pizza driver or a clerk driver, and you pull that up and they have so many violations, you look at it and say, okay, you have a valid license. Your insurance company, 9 times out of 10, are going to, if you're going to put them in one of your vehicles or cover them under one of your policies, they're going to do the background check for you, okay? So you really don't need to worry about it, but it's an option on the internet to look at. Again, any information that you get that might be negative on a potential applicant, you have to ask yourself, what about Santa? Okay? Is it a reasonable accommodation? Is it reasonable to hire them? Is it good for your business? Look at the person. Be blind about the person. Look at their requirements. Look at the personality of that person and what they can bring to you, either in your workforce or generally, and take it from there. Yes.
So if your business is working with children, prior to their coming on board, can you say that your employment is contingent on the criminal background check?
Yeah, if
Child abuse thing?
you're mandated, if you're working with children in this state, to have backgrounds, even volunteers working with children, you're mandated to have background checks. So if you're talking to a person, and again, in your letter saying, I'd like to offer you blah, 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 this is all contingent upon you meeting the requirements under the Pennsylvania, and I can't even remember what the name of it is now, but it's the abuse background check, criminal background check. You want that in your acceptance. That's why you put everything in writing.
That's probably what should be in my packet, is that background check thing.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
When your business would be such that it has to comply with everything with Homeland Security and other things, is there anything right now that is an exception and makes you so that you are required to hire employees that tell you they're using the so-called medical marijuana?
If you look at the statute that is towards the end of the package, it basically tells you that if you're working for certain organizations in the government, if you're working in certain areas and that person is on medical marijuana, there's wiggle room in there, okay? But you have to take that on a case by case. I can't give you a general, this is what you need to do or this is what you don't need to do. But you take a look at that and you talk to your HR person and you work around it.
You get with somebody like you.
There are really good employment law firms in this area too. You don't need to go to Pittsburgh. You have Beard, you have, my office does some local work, but there are, Amy Willett in the area does work like this, Patrick Finelli. I mean, so there are local people that you can go to. Dave Andrews used to be great, but you know, we know what, Dave wants to retire, so I tease him all the time. But yes, there is some wiggle room, but you need to work on that with your HR department. Any other questions?
Got like 3 more minutes.
I have 3 more minutes. I can. Okay. Well, then here's my fill, because at the end, and I have this in there. All right. So here are the employment laws. Let's go over them real quick. Title VII, civil rights. ADA or ADAA, that's the amendment to the American with Disabilities. It makes a broader scope of what a disability is. Age discrimination, we talked about that briefly. Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, or GINA, G-I-N-A. You can't ask for any information on any application regarding any type of medical situation or condition, okay? Pregnancy Discrimination Act. It's a specific act, but it's under Title VII. Don't even ask if the person's pregnant. Don't even go there with that. You can't even say to the person, oh, you look really uncomfortable. You really shouldn't be working these long hours. Wrong, can't do that. Uniform Service Employment and Redeployment Act, or the Vietnam-era Veterans Readjustment Assurance Act. Those are just some of the federal. Now you got the state. You have the Sexual Orientation / Gender Equality that was signed by Governor Wolf 2 years ago. That is broader than Title VII of the federal law, which makes it a violation for any agency under the governor's jurisdiction or any entity that's awarded contracts by the state to do any type of discrimination for gender identity, gender expression, gender-related identities, transgender, sexual orientation. It covers everything. Okay, so that's a biggie in Pennsylvania, because if you hear the United States Supreme Court saying, okay, this may not be a discrimination for sexual orientation, if you're an entity that receives money from the state or a state entity under the governor's jurisdiction, that could be state universities, you would be nailed, okay? So then you have the Pennsylvania Child Labor Act, Pennsylvania Equal Employment Law, Pennsylvania Military Affairs Act. Now get this, it covers not only the Pennsylvania National Guard, but if your jurisdiction, if you live in Pennsylvania, it covers the federal military reserves as well, because the federal government doesn't cover the Federal Reserves. So thank you.